Did you know that sexual abuse of children is a punishable crime in the US unless you are a Jewish American who is willing to escape to Israel? More than 60 people accused of child sex abuse have escaped justice in the US and fled to Israel since 2014, making the Zionist regime a sanctuary for sex offenders. And while the US has established itself as a global cop for human rights violations around the world, pedophiles on the run within its borders have gone off the radar, only to land safely in a distant land that has violated innumerable international human rights violations with no accountability in sight. A CBS News investigation found in 2020 that many accused American pedophiles were fleeing to Israel with full knowledge that bringing them to justice would be difficult there. These cases have been documented by Jewish Community Watch, a US-based organization that tracks accused pedophiles and tries to bring them to justice. Many of the accused go on to abuse children in Israel as well. Let's look at the case of Jimmy Julius Caro. Caro sexually assaulted a 9-year-old girl in Oregon in 2000, but he fled to Israel after converting to Judaism and before being indicted in the US. 2 years later, he was convicted of a child molestation in an Israeli court for a separate case and was released from prison after serving time. In 2021, Caro was sentenced to 13 years in prison in Israel for raping a child. Caro had been successfully evading authorities in the US and Israel for over 2 decades, and he is not alone. Criminals like Caro have long exploited a specific process known as the Law of Return, which says that any Jewish person can move to Israel and automatically gain citizenship. Child rights activists have long warned that the dark loophole in this law has allowed Jewish pedophiles to flee court-mandated supervision in the US and move to Israel with a clean record. This devastating reality begs the question, how have so many Jewish pedophiles gotten away with child abuse for so long? Unlike in the places where they committed sex offenses, Jewish sex offenders who obtain Israeli status through the Law of Return are not under any restrictions in Israel. To make matters even more complicated, Israel has a private national sex offender registry, which only Israeli police and prison services can access. But this list is effectively non-existent when it comes to identifying criminals with a history of child sex abuse in other countries. In fact, there is no obligation in Israel to even warn residents about the presence of sex offenders in the community, making it easier for child abusers to find sanctuary there and continue being sexual predators. The problem with escaping sex offenders does not stop with child abusers either. There has been a documented trend of Jewish sexual predators, fraudsters, money launderers, and war criminals in the US fleeing to Israel to seek refuge and avoid punishment. This past October, Jewish-American Hollywood director Brett Ratner, who has multiple sexual misconduct allegations against him since the Me Too movement, relocated to Israel. Ratner's move to Israel came just days after he was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's special guest at the UN General Assembly in New York. Now, isn't that quite a coincidence? Several other sexual predators who achieved significant fame and wealth in the US have fled to Israel in recent years, including Bryan Singer, another famous Hollywood director who moved to Israel years ago after being accused of rape and sexual assault of minors. In fact, Singer has been treated so well there that he is planning a comeback that would include making movies based in Israel. But much of the mental ease that Jewish sex offenders and other criminals have when fleeing to Israel has to do with the systemic protection of Jews in a state that calls itself the only democracy in the Middle East. The reality in Israel shows that the ultra-Orthodox politicians go as far as supporting sex offenders and facilitating their entry into other countries. For the past several decades, Israel has become the safe haven for pedophiles, as sex offenders have found it increasingly convenient to settle down there. For some, they continue their prestigious careers in a new land that entirely ignores their criminal and predatory past.